Hello.
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 And welcome.
And welcome.
And welcome
And welcome to
Backseat Genius.
to Backseat Genius.
The Backseat Genius.
The Backseat Genius.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Clubhouse. I'm here with Josh again, and that's a familiar face, but someone we don't see a lot. I don't think you guys have seen him, at least on the podcast yet, and this is Zach, the owner of Supernova Toys and Collectibles, BSG sponsor. He's given us the privilege of being able to go out with nice hockey jerseys and like getting like logos, like big banners like this, and providing us a place to test. Which, speaking of the place, Supernova Toys and Collectibles, we're here in Bridgeview, Illinois. If you're ever in the area, please stop by. Obviously, we have Lorcana cards, all different types of TCG, but also we have action figures, collectibles, everything of that nature. And real quick, if you can hand the mic over to Zach, if you can plug the shop little like website where people can go, exactly, anything you want to say about it.
Sure. Hi. In case you guys didn't hear, my name is Zach. I'm the owner here at Supernova Toys and Collectibles. We're located in Bridgeview. We do a bunch of stuff. Trading cards is one of them, right? As you can see, like we have the Lorcana channel, but we also do action figures and we do Legos. If you guys are ever in the area, definitely check us out. But the way to check us out indefinitely is to go on our website. It's www.supernovatnc.com. You guys can also follow us on Instagram, where we provide tons of updates with new stuff we bring in, new collectibles, trading cards, action figures, and you can find us at super_nova_toys on Instagram. So definitely give us a follow for tons of updates with the store, with our team. And yeah, we look forward to you guys checking us out and me checking you out.
Oh, okay. A little and you do a lot of Whatnot streams too.
Oh, actually, thank you, John. Yeah, we're also on Whatnot. You guys can follow us at Supernova Toys. It's all the same. But check us out for live streaming. We do tons of stuff on there. Mainly TCG, but we also do action figures on there as well. So check us out on Whatnot.
Yeah. And so I think we can go ahead and transition to what is the topic for today. What are we going to be going over? And I think the overall encompassing topic that we want to go over is how to get better at TCGs. So obviously for a lot of people, there's LCQs coming up. So you're trying to figure out productive ways to test for the LCQs or Continentals if you're already qualified. Some of you, if you're watching, might be, qualified for Worlds already, as they announced that. But this can be going on for just forever in the future, for future DLCs, set champs, anything that's coming up. And I think I want to start here talking with Josh, because Josh, both you and Zach have been a part of a lot of TCGs, and not as much as of recent, but Zach, you were mentioning you've been a part of a lot of TCGs and playing competitively, so you do have a lot of experience on how to get better in TCG just as a whole. But for Josh, since you actually have been active more like recently, what would be some tips and tricks, let's say, for somebody who is kind of new to a game? A lot of people are new coming into Lorcana. It's a lot of Disney fans, people who have never been introduced to TCGs before, hopping into this game, whether just by themselves or finally someone that they were playing Magic with all the time that wasn't interested in Magic. Well, they're interested in Disney. They're figuring this out. So for people like that, let's say, what would you say is a good entry level point for someone to start like upping their game? They're casual, they're just kind of learning the game, but now they're at that point where they're getting confident enough to go to a local. How should they kind of prep to get to that point?
Yeah, I think one of the big things when you're first starting out of the game is like, don't try and do too much in the very beginning. I've seen a lot of players that I played with in Magic try to go over Lorcana and just went straight to challenge events, straight to set champs, and like they just get burnt out super quickly. When you put this like expectation on yourself from previous games you played to translate very well easily, it's like a whole new game and a whole new stepping stone. So I think just trying to like understand, one, what makes this game similar to the games you played before, or if there's no games you played before, like just go to the basics. Just because you have like people you're bringing into the game might be a little bit higher. Go to the basics, make sure you understand that perfectly, because like if you are trying to skip steps, you might be able to learn one deck really good, but it's not going to translate if you don't have the fundamentals down.
Yeah. All right, Zach, what would you say? So like in your past. First of all, can you go over like what TCGs you've kind of you've played before, you have experience with, and then what would your advice be to somebody who's just getting into a TCG?
Sure. For those who don't know, I started out in Yu-Gi-Oh. I played competitive Yu-Gi-Oh for, easily a decade. I've got a couple of Premier Tops. I also played Magic. I played Magic for a little while. I also played Pokemon for like a brief second. So I have some familiarity with a bunch of TCGs, but mainly Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm also in Lorcana. I'm not super competitive in Lorcana, but the competitive juices are always flowing. Mm-hmm. My advice to any new player trying to get into any game, specifically Lorcana, it's just if you have the basic understanding, like Josh mentioned, right, understanding the fundamentals, right, that's super important, right? And to move further in the game, like if you don't understand the basics, it's hard to progress, right? So for those who don't know, like a DLC or what is it? Continentals?
Yep.
Those are larger scale tournaments, right? And in my opinion, the best way to prep for that is you have a clear, defined thing that you want to do, right? Like if you just want to play with your friends at the house, that's okay, right? But the next step from that is going to a locals, and that can be daunting, like super daunting, right? I remember my first locals, I had no idea what was going on. Right. I didn't know what the decks did. I just played in the basement with my friends with my Blue Eyes cards, right? But then you go and then you see clear defined strategies that people are adopting from these bigger tournaments, right? So first things first is you go and you understand what the local meta is, right? Because the local meta differs from like a larger event.
Absolutely.
So you go there and you test the waters, seeing what the other players are playing. And if you have a basic understanding of the game and you're matching well with these players at your local, then you should do well at the next tournament, right? Which is like a DLC, a regionals, an SJC, or a YCS. Right, so my advice for all new players is understand the basics, test, and what I mean by test is learn your deck and learn what it does against other decks, and then learn what those decks do against your decks. And if you have a good understanding of that, you should do well at other events.
Yeah, Josh?
Yeah, just saying one thing on top of that. It's like one thing that this game has that's super cool is like the set champs, where you get to have your like local meta, and like half the people in that room from going to locals, but then you also get like a whole handful of people that may live around you, but don't go to your exact locals. And that just allows you to like kind of get a, breath of fresh air from like the same decks you're playing against every time, It allows you to kind of see how you can compete in like a higher level setting when there's a little more pressure on the line, just than your local prizes, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So let's break it down a little bit more. I know, so we were going over locals here. I kind of want to go over pros and cons of different levels of testing, because that's the big thing. So we kind of went over now here as an entry-level player, someone just getting into Lorcana, or really just any TCG in general, the foundations of what it takes to like make that next step, going to locals. Now, being somebody who, your blood's pumping with a competitive scene, you're all in, right? Like we are kind of with Lorcana right now, and how you were with Yu-Gi-Oh, like you mentioned, Magic, the other games that you were playing. You hit that point where you're like, all right, locals it's fun to go to. It's good to test like new decks, things like that. But what's the most productive way? Like there are pros and cons to locals. Pros maybe being that you get to test the decks, seeing if it really is good. Some of the cons may be that maybe not the best players. Some casual players are going to locals, right? So sometimes it's not the best form of testing. However, it can get you into the rhythm with the new decks that you're trying to play, things like that. But now we're trying to branch into, all right, I'm going to, let's stick to Lorcana, set champs. That's the next level, I would say, below DLC, or a 1K or a case tournament, whatever. You're going to see more high-level competitors going to those people traveling from other places to show off what they have. What is the best way you would say for someone transitioning now, going from like, okay, I find, I've been going to locals now for the last couple months. I feel like I'm ready to take that next step. What is a productive way of testing from locals to being ready for a set champ?
Yeah, so I would say, you go to your locals every week. It's most of the same people playing most of the same decks. But what you need to do is kind of find a bigger picture before you set foot into that step champs area. So like go online, figure out, what decks are playing well online, what decks are winning these challenge events, what decks are consistently doing well. Because, you don't want to sit down your set champs and have never seen what your opponent's playing before, and it ends up being like one of the most popular decks in the room. You're just like, no one at your local saw it. So just making sure you understand all that's going on in the meta beyond just your small local area.
To touch up on that, I would say the main differences between like your locals and an actual DLC, like DLC, right, is your local, and I'm guilty of it. Princesses, you play against the same guy playing princesses, or we used to have a guy named Muka Muka who used to play Venom Nagas or this reptile deck, right?
Sure.
No matter what set came out, no matter what updates to the meta, he was still playing this same deck, right? Reptiles with just updates. And it happens at your locals. Just the difference is going to the DLC, like Josh mentioned, right? You have to do your research, right? If you are in a small pond, right, and you're the big fish, that means you got to get out. But like the thing is, it's daunting to go to a DLC. And if you're not prepared, you can get, what's the word I would use here, avalanched, right, by like all the competitive strategies, right? There's so many different aspects of the game once you like go to the next level. And then if you're not prepared, it's really going to hurt you. So like to touch upon your point, the best way is to find a competitive group that have been to these events before and see if you can ingratiate yourselves with them. And then hopefully this way you can learn new strategies, make new friends, and then take your game to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little easier in some other TCGs that actually have, like, I'm not trying to call out Ravensburg or anyone, but they have an online client where you can test a little easier, right? Sure. We have the pleasure of having a space, again, in Supernova to be able to come out and test a lot with us, and we're all in the same kind of relatively the same area, so we're able to come out often and test against each other. So if you can do something like that, it's really productive, but that's not viable for a lot of people, right? So I do like that branch point. Josh, I want to get your idea, like as far as like having a group together, do you think that is maybe the more productive way to test, as opposed to it's more productive than going locals? We can agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the most productive ways to find a group of people, like Zach said, where you can kind of just put your head down, really focus in, and then if you do think it's the most productive, or if you think it's generally productive, what can you do when you're a part of these groups to actually make it productive? Because you just playing games, it's good to get reps, but is that really the most productive thing?
Yeah, I think there's two parts really in the whole testing. It's the physical testing, gathering your information, and then it's communicating about what you've learned and then taking action steps from there, right? So I think when you're able to play 4 rounds in 4 hours, which is what a local is, you get 4 games in against 4 different decks. And to be honest, like you said, 1 or 2 of them probably are not real decks, right?
Yeah.
So, but then when you get into testing team, what you're able to do is in that same time, let's say I'm playing blue-red and I want to understand my like purple-red matchup, I can just play 10, 20 games in the same time just against that. And then while I'm playing purple-red and against or blue-red against purple-red, you can be over here playing amber-steel against green-steel, right? And so like I don't need to perfectly understand what's going on there while I'm playing, because after that we can talk about it. Yeah. So it's just that, this is what I learned, this is what I learned. It's so much more efficient if you trust the people you're working with and you don't have to gain all the data yourself.
Sure. And so, Zach, you bringing that up, I just have to assume that you probably engraved yourself into groups and you would test with people when you were going to these competitive bets. Or maybe not. Maybe there are other ways that you were testing. What was you found when you were in this ultra competitive mode and you had more time to go to these events? Were you doing leading up to them?
Honestly, so in the beginning, and I will say something about locals, right, that it's like I feel like has gone amiss recently, right? With any card game, there's always some strategy that some player is playing at the locals that can be adopted and adapted to like a bigger event, right? Oh, yeah. So sometimes you can find inspiration anywhere. Specifically at locals, you can, right? So my strategy at these big tournaments are to get prepped with them. One, we had a great group of people that we played with that were very competitive, that went to all the events. But my specific strategy, like mine personally, was I would seek out the best players at the tournaments, right? Because we would get there early and there'd be somebody having locals. I would just aim to find the best player at the time or whoever the recent champion was and just play them. Okay. Right? And play them and play them. And then I got myself into those groups and like my skill like went up significantly. Right? And I'm not saying that everybody can do that, but you should always aim to find people who are better than you and try to play with them, right? Because they know things that you're not going to know. They have more tricks than that you will not know. And it's better to test your mettle against those types of players, right? Sure. And you'll be more better for it. It's not always the case for some people. Like you can only, play against your local pro who happens to be really good, who's went to a set champs or went to a regional or YCS. But if you can play that guy and you're finding success playing against that gentleman, then it's your job, right? If you are taking this seriously, to find the next step up, right? Like the next level up to him and play them, right?
And what I say, so do you think just playing them, getting the reps in against the top player is enough in and of itself, or was there something more of a strategy that you were putting forward to like take like, okay, this is how I'm going to go into this match? It's more of a, because if I'm relating it back to when I play sports, right? A lot of times when you're practicing, it's not necessarily if you're scrimmaging to win. It's to figure out what it is that you're doing wrong or maybe certain strategies that you're not sure it's going to work, but putting them forth because it's practice time.
Sure.
Right? So we're testing it out here to see if it does work and cleaning up things that are not, exactly like right, even though you might be winning, but you might be missing things out because you're going to locals and you're winning every local. So you're like, oh, I'm good. But when you're playing the top guy, it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm good. A lot of times it's just the little things that make a difference between someone who's good and someone who's great.
Sure.
So was it just playing, or do you think there was more into it?
So I had a concise strategy for like everything that I wanted to do, right? Like if there was a deck, and at the time there was, it wasn't as prodigious as it is now in terms of like, there used to be metagames. So you can see some of the top decks, right? You might catch some stuff on YouTube and you can, make a strategy off of that. To me, personally, it's just, I had a strategy in mind, right? And I would try to seek out the top players if I was already, talking to them or playing against them, and I would see how my strategy would do. More or less, mine was like an alignment what they would do, but there would be different, play styles, like or cards that they preferred over stuff that I preferred, and I would tweak my stuff based on that. Other times, it's just tough, right? Because like, let's say you have a great idea, and sometimes you don't want to play against top players, or you don't want to reveal your strategy, right? And then you just go get smoked. Yeah. But there's something in that, right? And I feel like you can take from those, like there's lessons to be taken from that, from getting your face kicked in for sure, right? But to me, like the best way I learned is, I love taking the L, right? Because I learned more in a loss than I would in a win, right? If I was winning all the time, you wouldn't see the flaws in your deck or your strategy or your style for that matter, right? And that's
it's
just
easy to get complacent.
100%, right? And that's just my views on it. I'm not sure.
Josh, how do you feel about that? So like, we have a test group, right? We play a lot, but especially with you, even coming into our group and just a lot of the background with you, like a lot of it is, kind of data analysis and bringing this to like TCGs and going even deeper than just strictly playing.
Yeah.
So you have a strategy at least that you've brought up that you like to do where you play a certain amount of games, kind of test it, see how it goes, and then kind of move on to the next like deck or to see how it goes against that.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, right? Can you expand on that? Like, if you want to.
Yeah. So I guess it's as simple as just like you want to be able to paint the biggest picture you can possibly paint. And to do that, you need a lot of people to paint that picture because no one has all the time in the world.
Absolutely.
And so what you need to do is start out with maybe 10, you pick a deck and you play against the meta 10 games versus each deck. Then you go on to the next one, play everything 10 games, right? And what it's able to build is you can have a 10-game matchup matrix of every single deck in the realm. Then, if you have more time, 20 of everything, 30 of everything, and the more games you play, the stronger your data gets.
Sure.
But I just think it's when you're able to have the same people testing the same matchups, it brings a lot of consistency.
Yeah.
Versus just, trying to pull matchups from tournament results. Someone might have had a good run.
Yeah.
What were their matchups? We don't always know every single one of their matchups, right?
Yeah.
So we see Amber Steel won a tournament. Well, did they have a really good run, or were they playing against everything and beating everything? Yeah. There's just a lot of the picture that's not gotten just by going on ink decks and looking at the results.
Sure. And I kind of feel like a fact right here, and you guys are the answers because it's just a lot of stuff I want to ask. Kind of, it feels like general questions, but branching off of that. So let's say you're testing a deck, right, and you're maybe play testing a certain card. And I know even in Lorcana, Zach, if we've done this a lot where it's like we're testing decks, and just from playing it, you're like, man, I don't know how this card is. Like, I was trying to make it work, but I'm not sure if it's working, or maybe I'm just playing too many. Maybe I gotta. So, how do you distinguish when the deck that you're playing, it's the difference between like, oh, this deck is just not it, and I need to make several changes, versus like this particular card that I'm trying out isn't working out? How do you distinguish that?
Can I go? Specifically to answer your question, so if we're just talking about a specific card, right? It's just how it plays for you, right? If I've played this card against whatever, any color combination, like let's say your deck or like your blue steel deck or something, right?
Sure.
And
RIP.
yeah, RIP. But it's never like it's done some things, but it has a significant impact. Or as soon as I draw it, I'm like, it's a game changer, right?
Yeah.
So that, in my mind, is how I determine whether a card is like super viable. If it does, anytime I play it and it does something, like it changes the game or it swings the momentum in my favor, then that's a card I consider. If I've played, like Josh said, 10 games back to back, and every time I drew this card is either not enough or doesn't put enough pressure or something, like then that card can be like excluded, right? And there's probably something better, or there's just not like a card for that matchup or something like that. I feel like Lorcana is super specific, and there's not like one card that answers everything, right? Like in other card games there is, like Yu-Gi-Oh! If there's playing a bunch of back row decks, you can play Heavy Storm, right? And that takes care of a lot of stuff. But there's nothing like that in Lorcana. So like the way, going back to what we were saying earlier, it's just if we're testing and a card makes a huge difference, it's worth it, right? And if your deck is not doing something, then maybe we need to like re-strategize or like completely scrap the deck, right?
Yeah.
Because I've done that plenty of times, I will tell you right now.
Yeah, no.
Where I thought my deck was good and it just isn't good.
Right.
And it's okay though, right? Because like you're learning that way.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's the best way to do it with like Lorcana specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll say coming from Magic, it's very different. Your like process of is a card good or not. Because in Magic we have something called a sideboard. So in a best of 2 game, you have your 60 card deck, and that's mostly just like your staples, your plan A for your deck. And like your interaction is going to be very universal interaction, right? Interaction that touches a lot of things, like you said. And then you have 15 cards in your sideboard, and a lot of times those cards slide in with like your interaction stuff to be more matchup specific, right? Yeah. So you can have cards that like, destroy all items, flatten them. That would be a sideboard card in Magic, right? And like you're probably not going to play that card in Lorcana. So I think when you're trying to figure out like what cards you're going to play in Lorcana, I think the first step needs to be looking at its inkability. Is it inkable or uninkable? And the reason why I say that is because if a card is good and is really good against purple green, right? It like auto wins your purple green matchup. But there's 6 other matchups in the room, and it's does stone cold nothing versus anything else. If that card's inkable and you can ink it versus every time you're not playing against purple green, it's got to be real good in that matchup, but it's like fine, right? But then if that card is uninkable, then like you're going to have to do something with that card every single game. If you're blue, you can TPO it, you can fishbone it. So there's like a little bit more wiggle room you have there. Mm-hmm. But like with any other color that can't like throw those cards in your inkwell, like those tech cards need to be very good if they're uninkable. And then I think just like, how many extra slots do I have? Here's a couple cards that like could fit in. Looking at card A, what is it on a scale of 1 to 10 versus each deck, and compare it. Find the cards that are uninkable where they're good in the most amount of matchups, because that's your crutch in this game, is your uninkable cards.
Right. All right, Zach, you had something?
I just had a thing. Maybe it's a thought that just popped in my head, right? It's like in Lorcana, so what I found, and maybe you guys can agree or disagree with me, but there's like no specific card that's like great against every card, right? So what I found in this particular game, there's no one card that's like I guess it's like your deck specific or color specific, right? But it's not like I could just throw this deck like this card in, and I'm like, man, I have a great matchup against everything, and it's gonna work out. I haven't found that yet, right?
I would say Bucky was one, and probably Diablo last set. This set, it doesn't feel like it as much for one reason or another. Probably Genie.
Just to touch on what you were saying, like Bucky was, basically the meta, right? It's like you're playing Bucky or you're not, right? And then if you're trying to combat that specific thing, right? It's just like how much success were you having, right? And that ties back into like what we were talking about, deck building with specific cards, and it's just like me personally, I have not seen that, right? I could be wrong though.
Here in Flaversham would beg to differ. Drawing 2 cards off of a card that comes in and draws you a card, that's always good.
Okay, so all right, so Hiram, right? It's only good in the blue deck, but it's not like if you're playing against the red, like cool, I could draw 2 cards, but like how great is this when I'm facing down a huge board against aggro? Like
you could draw 2 cards early. You can draw 2 cards late.
I'm with that. I'm with
whenever you want it.
Chat or
Watching,
I'm always down for drawing 2 cards.
Always. No.
It's 3 if you have a popsicle.
Or it's 4 if you're playing.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's great. That is great. No, but hey, what I want to add. Okay, I'm I'm a stressed Lorcana player going to a DLC, right? Just imagine me just in my woes looking at all of these cards I have on the table right now. I have 72 cards in a deck that I want to build, right? All laid out. I'm stressing, right? I need to play this card, but like I need to be at 60. You put a hand on my shoulder, right? You put a hand on my shoulder. What do you say to somebody that goes, I have to be at 60? Let's say, let me bring it down a little bit. Let's say I'm at 64. Let's make it a little easier, right? But man, these 4 cards are just, if I feel like they're necessary. But Josh, you put your hand on my shoulder while I'm looking at all this. What do you say? Do you say, hey buddy, it's not that big a deal, go with what your gut says, or do you say, cut that shit?
My top 16 16 Seattle with 67 cards.
There we go.
66, 68.
72.
Some absurd blue-red amount of numbers. I don't know the exact numbers. All jokes aside, blue-red can kind of get away with it because of develop, because of visions,
So
how the
much
deck is played.
Filtering.
But if you're not playing a blue deck, get that shit down to 60.
Get it to
Get it to 60.
Not even 61. Wasn't there a stat that came out that the highest performance based on an amount of cards in a deck was 61? Am I tweaking?
It's probably just like
the most
because it's like 60 or 67. Is it an average number? So like there's a little bit of 67s that are like
I guess,
pulling the 60 up a little bit to 61, or is
Sure,
it
I
that it's
see.
like there's 61 is the deck
I
that's
think
the
it was
most.
based on like day twoing. Like what was the percentage of decks that were day twoing at 61 was like the most day twos.
That's interesting.
I could be wrong. If Justin finds the stat somehow, I'm sure he'll put it on the screen and show me whether I'm wrong or right. But I know there's a singular 72 card deck, and we know that was Hamza. So so we know it's possible, right? But to wrap it out here, what would you say, Zach, as far as should you put your hand on my shoulder? I'm stressing about 64 versus 60.
So listen, I'm the guy who plays 66 cards. So I'm not sure if I'm the one who wants to tap you on the shoulder. But I will say this, right? It's like sometimes, and it's just based on how you play, right? 60 is like what you want mathematically, like the chance of you pulling that card you need. Like you need to play 60. The closer you are to 60, the better, right?
Yep.
But, and this is just my experience from previous card games, right? I've always been a proponent of playing more than the allotted just because, like, cheating exists, right? And why I play 61 is because if they take one of my cards, I'm not at 59, right? And that's like,
Sure, I guess.
right? You know what I mean? It's
If you're really afraid of a whole new world.
No,
Magic, we weren't just
it's a-
stealing each other's cards.
I didn't say they were. Whoa, who said anything about stealing? I'm just saying, like,
Magically disappearing.
it just sometimes things happen,
Things
bro.
are
Like,
gone.
you know what I mean? Deck checks.
You open up your deck box and all of a sudden 3 cards are in there and you just
Sure.
slowly close it.
Yeah, you do. Or, somebody, like wants to read your card and they put it back in their own box.
Yeah, right.
Seattle. As someone who actually left a card in their deck box, that is not a game loss. Just call a judge on yourself because it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
So it's fine.
So let's
I did.
Let's do a
After
war.
on my top 16, I said judge on myself. Am I going to Disney or no? I screwed up.
Let me caution here: we're not saying to do that, and then to like after the fact mention it. Don't
do it on
purposely-
purpose. But if you accidentally do it, you should probably call judge on yourself so you don't get DQ'd.
Yeah, be honest. But I think we've given a lot of really good information, especially for people that are entering into Lorcana or any TCG just in general and wants to get into locals. I think a big thing that I would want to say is like it's going to be nerve-wracking. I was nervous. I was a kid going into my first Yu-Gi-Oh! Local, and I thought I had the sickest deck of it was what is it, banishing cards as opposed to sending them to the graveyard, and I thought I was sick. I thought it was great, and people were just like playing Light Sworn and just destroying me, and playing like dropping Honest, like nice try, bud. Like I don't know what you think, but like it can be nerve-wracking. But I think overall, especially Lorcana, I mean I haven't played a lot of TCGs, but people are really welcoming. People really love like when newcomers come into the game, and I'm sorry for the health of any TCG as a player, you should want people to come into the game.
Very important.
And so you should be welcoming if someone's learning. You're gonna win the game anyway. Like come on, you might as well just teach them while you're winning it. So it makes someone's experience fun and enjoyable. And so go for it, man. Just get out of your comfort zone. Like once you feel like you're ready to hit the locals, hit them. Like Zach was kind of mentioning, it could be a big thing if you go straight to a DLC. It might be very daunting, and it might even make you not want to play again because it's just a lot of high-level competition. Even people that aren't doing as well, a lot of them are people that are experienced not doing as well. And for you as a newcomer, even they are going to feel like incredible competition. So start out at your locals, go there for a few times. After that, hit your set champs. If there's a 1K by you, something, go test out over there, meet some friends, groups like we mentioned, test with them, ask them for advice or suggestions and build off of that. See, when you're playing the games, don't only just like focus on what you're doing, focus on what your opponent's doing, and you can learn from that too. But ultimately, I think this was a good conversation just for anybody at any level that's trying to prepare for any version of competition. And so thank you guys for coming on, mentioning, your advice or suggestions. Do you have something real quick?
Finish this in closing. Guys, ultimately at the end, you're playing this to have fun.
Yes.
So the most important thing is if you're not having fun, then it's something you shouldn't do. In any trading card game, specifically Lorcana, I've had a bunch of fun. I've met a whole bunch of new people, new friends, and that's way more important than like winning, even though it's not. But having fun it's like the main priority for me, right? So in this game, you're gonna make new friends, you're gonna have fun, and hopefully you learn a lot. And I'll leave it at that.
You're way nicer on like when we're recording, because behind this, Zach's if you're not first, you're last. You know what, buddy? You're never making it.
Zach, what do you think of lunch? What do you think of lunch breaks in the middle of tournaments?
Yeah. Oh, okay. We can't go over this again. We can.
Let me. So listen. Hear me out. Hear me out. I'm all about lunch breaks during tournaments. It was a thing that I grew up on. Listen, Yu-Gi-Oh had that. Round 2, round 3, and you're going on lunch. The YCSs, yes, there were, but guys, my ultimate thing is there. Well, yes, I think there should be, and if the time allots for that. But a lot of times, people just want to play and get out of there. But for those who are just trying to have fun, guys, ultimately this is a game that we're trying to compete in and have fun at, right?
Absolutely.
I'd rather have a little meal break in the middle of it while I'm getting my ass whipped or whooping ass.
But yeah, ultimately, I think what you're closing out with is you're playing these games to have fun. It's not that serious. At the end of the day, when you're really competitive, it feels that serious, right? When you lose, like it does. Trust me.
But the spirit of
I
it
hate
is.
it. It feels it, but that's why you lose and you keep playing. It's 'cause it's just fun.
Yes.
Josh, do you have anything to finish out with? What would you say to anybody who's just getting into TCGs? Just general advice for them.
Do it. You meet super great people. It's a lot of fun, and you get to travel if you play enough. So,
absolutely,
10 out of 10 would recommend.
All right, guys. Thank you for coming back to our channel, watching another episode. Please leave likes, comments, any suggestions for any topics you want us to go over. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. And again, thank you to Supernova Toys and Collectibles here in Bridgeview, Illinois, where we shoot from, we test from. We have locals every Monday at like 7. So if you're in the area, please stop by. And aside from that, I think we're good at that. Have a good time testing, guys. Back to the what?
Back to you in the studio.
Yeah, right.
This shit better recorded.
Back to you. No, I wasn't recording.
That was great. That was super lighthearted. Good job. Good job, Honor.